The words of the Gospel of Luke, which have been preserved by the Church and handed down to us for our hearing, our understanding, and our discussion this morning. Jesus said, "You're my dearest friends. God wants to give you the beloved community itself. So be generous. Give to the poor. Get yourselves a bank that can't go bankrupt. A bank in heaven far from bank robbers, safe from embezzlers. A bank you can bank on." It's obvious, isn't it? The place where your treasure is the place you will most want to be and end up being. Keep your shirts on. Keep the lights on. Be like house servants waiting for their master to come back from his honeymoon, awake and ready to open the door when he arrives and knocks. Lucky the servants whom the master finds on watch. He'll put on an apron, sit them at the table, and serve them a meal, sharing his wedding feast with them. It doesn't matter what time of the night he arrives. They're awake and so blessed. You know that if the house owner had known what night the burglar was coming, he wouldn't have stayed out late and left the place unlocked. So don't you be slovenly and careless. Just when you don't expect it, the child of humanity will show up. This is the gospel of Christ.
Praise to Christ the Lord.
Well, it's probably no surprise that the lessons this morning are about faith. That's what everything seems to be talking about. The question I have, and one of the questions I've been working on in one of the books I'm writing, has been, what is the purpose of faith? Why? Why have it? What is the ultimate reason to tell people, or that people might even say to you, well, you have to have faith? What would you say is the ultimate reason for faith? Why is it something that a person who comes to the liturgy, comes to services, or someone who's part of the community, why should they want to have it? I'm always amused when people say you must have faith, as if you could pick it up like a canned good at the grocery store. It doesn't happen exactly that way. But if one does have it, or one aspires towards it, how is it that it's worth anything? Why have faith? What does it do? Faith in what? To what purpose?
Faith gives you hope.
About what?
About the future.
About what future?
Your own.
Perhaps. In what way? Which future? Which own future are you talking about? Are you talking about tomorrow? Are you talking about a little bit down the road? Are you talking about
all of that?
Beyond this life?
No.
Just this life?
This life.
All right, so for you, faith is something that gives you hope for what's going to happen ahead, but within this life. Okay. Who else? Who else has an idea?
I think it's like a rope that you have on a tree that children learn to swing on, which can carry them above the grounding that they're on, and it allows them to move forward. And that is what we need all throughout life, because when obstacles and chaotic conditions occur, we need to be hanging on to this rope of faith to move us onward.
So you think that it's also, though, about this life?
Oh, definitely.
Anything to do with the life to come?
I think we only move through this life.
Okay. Other thoughts? That's very interesting. Other thoughts about faith. What is the purpose of faith? Why have it?
I just think it's like a blindness that occurs in spirit. So it's the same thing. I don't know about this life, but I kind of feel like if I'm living with faith in this life, it will lead me to whatever comes next. So it doesn't. It's a kind of mindset.
A mindset. Okay. Yeah. You're not sure yet. I find it interesting that to hear your responses, because I would say that the early church, and certainly the Gospels and the lessons that we read today, are all pointing not to this life at all, but to the life to come. And so the purpose of faith, at least in the Gospel writers' way of looking at it, and even looking at what was going on with Abraham and his generations, it was not for this life. It was all for whatever was to come beyond this life. And the purpose of faith, at least the way that the Bible presents it, has very little to do with anything that you just said, I think. Mostly to do with what is not known. But not known within a life that is not this life. In a life that is beyond this life. Abraham is taken out by God into the wilderness and said, "You see the stars? That will be all of the generations to come." That was certainly had nothing to do with what was going to happen in his life. In fact, everything was going to happen beyond his life. The letter to the Hebrews is talking about something that happens beyond this life. And when Jesus, through Luke's mouth, is speaking this morning, he's also talking about, he is somewhat grounded in this life, but he is talking more about a heavenly banquet, something that is going to be beyond this moment. So I find it interesting that at least people who have spoken so far this morning look at faith as something which helps us to carry us beyond this moment in our life further down. But what the church talks about and actually preaches, and these lessons are about, is what is going to happen beyond this life. It has very little to do with this life. It has to do with some other life beyond this one.
I was going to first say that faith is the thing that keeps you going when you have kind of problems. I think that's actually hope. There was some movie or something that said faith is a belief in things unseen and unproven. And I think that's what faith is, that you kind of make a leap beyond what scientists can prove to you, and you believe in something that you can't see, you can't prove, and nobody has seen it. But it's a thing that spurs you on for the future. I think it is for a different place.
Right. The quote that I used this morning, the intro, was from Dwight Moody, who's one of the great preachers of the 19th century, and I think it's very, very apt. It says, "Faith that cannot help us live will not help us die." If you think about that, faith that cannot help us live will not help us die. Again, he's saying that it doesn't make any difference what we have in this particular world. If we put everything on that and say, okay, this is what's going to satisfy us, it's not going to help us when we get to the point of death. Because I think that's what a lot of people are worried about or have centered their faith on, is what happens when we get in trouble, what happens when we get sick, what happens when we feel mortal. I think it has to do with the feeling of mortality and a hope for immortality in some form. So that's my answer to you, Joanne. I think that that is what the church has preached. Now, whether I believe that's a different story, but this is what I think the church has for so long talked about. It's something that goes on beyond this moment or any moment that we can imagine.
I remember that you said Sisco, and that's what helped the church get started, was honest to people of what was going on. They were like beyond, because they were preaching to slaves and the poor and all that, and it was like, they're not going to change.
That's the whole basis of liberation theology, for instance. It has nothing to do with what can be accomplished in this life, particularly, although by giving people hope about the next life, it has certainly empowered them in this one, which is why the Roman Catholic Church has been very, very upset about liberation theology, because it's upset the whole balance of power in poor countries. Because when people feel empowered about life, whether it be this one or some future one, they change the way they live. I think we were talking about this recently with Nelson Mandela, talking about being in prison and saying all those years in prison and all those years of apartheid, the fact that 90% of the country was being ruled by 10% of the people of a different race. Why was it that at no point anybody thought to say enough? And it wasn't until he came up with the idea, which is actually quite old, older than he, it actually comes from Frederick Douglass, and that is, the people we are waiting for are ourselves. We are always waiting for somebody else to do it, to free us. It's a victim mentality. And then we realized that we had it within us to do something. That's the whole basis of the relation theology. And one of the things that I think can be wrong with how people express faith, wrong in that it's hurtful, not only to them, but to their lives, is to assume it, to understand it, or to phrase it within a context of the victim mentality. I need to have faith because I'm so poor. I need to have faith because I'm a wretched soul. I need to have faith because I'm not worthy. I want something better than this moment. What I have right now is not good enough. All that is a victim mentality. It is somehow saying that what is present is not faith-worthy. And I think that one of the things that the church has helped to perpetuate is this type of thinking.
You mean it's negative?
This negative thinking, yeah. You need to have faith because you are a miserable person. You are not worthy.
Church administration more power?
It certainly has. How do you get worthy then, you ask? How am I worthy? Can you be worthy on your own? Now, this is where Martin Luther this is the whole basis of the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther says, yes, we can be worthy on our own. We don't need it from the church. We have faith, which you can't touch. It is a personal faith. And the church says, no, 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 no. The church said in the 1500s, it can only exist within community, and it has to exist within the community hierarchy. Who tells you what you can believe? You cannot believe anything else other than this. Well, Martin Luther said, no, 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 no. And he went up and he nailed 95 objections to that on the church door in 1519. And that broke open the whole discussion. Before that, you weren't even, well, you certainly weren't allowed to read the Bible, but you certainly were not allowed to have a discussion about faith. Whatever you knew, you talked about faith in hushed tones.
So was this the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment?
It was.
And the cracking open of the egg?
It is. It was, I think. And it had to do with how it is that people express or understand their faith. What the Protestant Reformation did was it allowed people to see for the first time that faith was not some future reality, but could be talked about in the way that you and Peg and Elizabeth and others have just said, that it can have something to do with this life and not some future life alone. It can be both. But it doesn't, it's not relegated to that. And what the church had done before that is they said, we not only are in charge of your life before you were born, we're in charge of your life while you're living it, and we're in charge of it when you go. That's what indulgences were about. You paid money to keep yourself and your ancestors out of hell, out of purgatory. That's how all the great cathedrals were built in Europe, out of that money. You went every week, and you might have paid off your debt, but you had to take care of Ray's because he was your uncle, because he was a nasty sinner. And they figured that he was worth at least another 20 years of payments. And that might help them, but they're not sure. And then, if you had a child, you had to take care of your future generations. You wanted to make sure your future generations were taken care of. This sounds kind of silly in a way, but it's not. And that there's other churches that now do this a different way. The Mormons, for instance, go back and baptize all people that they can find and claim them as Mormons. So it's very, very nice that the Mormon Church, for instance, does all this genealogical research, but don't be fooled by that. The reason for that is that they are going back and baptizing your ancestors as Mormons, so that in the world to come, everyone will be Mormon. Well, if you want to have a good group when you get there and very strong, you better start claiming them now, right?
Whether they want to be claimed or not.
That's right. Well, how is that any different than what the church has done for so long? We baptize children. They don't claim for themselves until they get older, perhaps.
This is their families that are doing it.
Well, somebody's related to somebody somehow. We're all related. How far back are you allowed to go? As long as they can prove That's why they do the research. As long as they can prove that they're related, you can baptize anybody in your family tree. And they go back, they've gone through all the records in Europe and places where, behind the Iron Curtain, what used to be the Iron Curtain, where you couldn't go before. They have done great research. You go online, you can find out just about anybody who ever lived. At least going back to when record keeping began, that sort of thing within the church. I've been able, through the Mormons, to trace my history back to 1425 in Germany. And even beyond that in the Scottish line. The Muslims, going back to the 1300s, thanks to the fact that they went back and they've done it all for me. You can just go online today when you go home, find it all. Did you know that? All your ancestors, yeah. If they were ever recorded anywhere. And any Mormon has ever made a study of that particular branch. Because what they do, they just sort of take their branch, they gather everybody else's also, just in case it might be related somehow. It's very, very helpful if you want to have genealogical research. But the whole purpose for this is to make the world Mormon. It's the second fastest growing church in the world.
What's the first?
What would you think?
Islam.
Pentecostal.
No, the fastest church, not religion.
It's the Pentecostal.
Pentecostal church, yeah. Pentecostal church. Right behind them. And they have a different message. Pentecostal church has a different message. But both of them are very interested, not particularly in this world. Both of them are particularly interested in the world to come. You know that if you're a Mormon, for instance, among other things that you're not allowed to do, there are many things you're not allowed to do: smoke, drink, caffeine, also things like that, dance. But you also are supposed to keep 3 years of goods in your basement for the Holocaust that is to come. Because every Mormon knows that when the world ends, that you're going to have food. And you have to go and rotate that food in your basement or your special closet that's built for this particular reason, so that all the Mormons at least will have a better chance of living beyond whatever destruction this world hands down. Unless we think that's just absolutely crazy, there are many other groups that are doing exactly the same. And I'm not being critical of this, or I'm not sounding like I'm being critical of it. This is a way of belief. This is a way of faith. This is one way of faith.
Many of the animals in the animal kingdom do that every single fall to prepare for winter or spring. So why is it not somewhere harbored in our own program?
Yeah, it could be.
If we're to
Do that.
prepare for the unknown or the
Right.
scarcities.
And so, what the church has done, though, is it takes it one step further. It says, not only this world, though, we have to prepare for what is to come. Now, last week I was speaking a little bit about this, and I asked people, had anyone, as a matter of a faith process, talk with their loved ones about what they want when they go? Do you have it written down somewhere? Have you told the pastor? Have you told the place where you want to be buried? Have you told your children these things? It used to be, I mean, Joanne and I were talking about this. I know that in some countries you don't talk about that ever. In Germany, my parents never talked about that, because if you talked about it, it meant somebody was going to die. So you just never talked about that. And so when people died, nobody knew what was supposed to be done. So somebody made a decision, and that was not the right decision. And for some family member, and then somebody will say, well, what difference does it make? She's dead. She doesn't care. And people say, oh no, she'll know. This is a matter of faith. And you can laugh, but you can laugh because you've heard this story, I know. But this is what people are very, very concerned about. And the church, as I said, again, talks about this, wants us to talk about it, brings it up often.
But church, I have that. So, she really seemed to be okay with this. She believed that someday they were in a better place, and someday they'd be together with whatever their God is that they believe, It really infused her life.
I would say that the majority of the New Testament is talking about faith in the world to come. It's very apocalyptic in how it views the world. Yes, this world is important, but more important is preparation. As it says, if the person who was at home knew when the burglar was going to come, He wouldn't have left home. If the people at the wedding party knew when the bridegroom was going to come back, they'd be ready. They'd have their lamps lit. But that is not talking about this particular world. Now, Eric and I were talking about this over the summer when we came to the whole idea of whether or not the Lord's Prayer is an apocalyptic prayer. We say the Lord's Prayer, well, we don't say it anymore, we sing it but in a different way, but for those of us who remember the old way, we say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. What does thy kingdom come mean? What did it mean? If it's an apocalyptic prayer, it means we want God's beloved community to break through. Well, if that happens, based upon what the church teaches, we will be dead. The world will not look like it does now. It'll be a whole different place. So in essence, if we take the Lord's Prayer to be an apocalyptic prayer, many people don't, but if one does, in saying that, what does thy kingdom come mean? It means the end of the world as we know it. So we have to think, well, is that what it means? What does thy kingdom come mean to you?
To me, all my life it's meant that the kingdom come is peace on earth. And I also disagree with everything you're saying, because we've been talking for years about living in the now, the present moment, to fully submit yourself to the time that you are in right this minute.
Right, well, I'm not saying that I espouse this belief, don't get me wrong, I'm telling you what the church has said. And I think that this is where we get into trouble, because can we bank on that? If it's only a future possibility, how do we bank on some future possibility and not on the present, the now, that, as I said, we've been talking about all these years? And so I take great issue with the gospel, and I take great issue with what the church has handed down for so long, because I think it does not take into consideration the possibility that this is the beloved community. Now, this may be it.
And even if this is not the be-all and end-all, the present moment now, it's only by living to your very best ability in the now that you gain and grow and become more ready for the next minute.
Yeah, but there are many people that don't understand that at all. And they're waiting for some, especially people who cannot live any better than they are now, let's say, in their minds. They may have an idea that is a very privileged notion on our parts. There are people who are very, very poor who say that I can't live any better than I'm ever going to live right now. I wish there was something. It's not just, and they look around, they see how many other people have much more. They say, that's what I want. Why can't I have it? Why am I being denied that? Well, the church preached for a long time. The reason is because everybody has their place in life, and that's just where yours is. But can I attain to anything more? Well, probably not in this life. Well, then I don't want that religion. So the church started preaching, at least in South America and other places in the liberation theology, that more was possible, maybe not in this life, but in a life to come. And you can see how that turns things upside down and makes people act a very, very different way. So you have people in 4 countries and in 4 underdeveloped countries who are working their entire life for something in the next. Does eternal life extend to, or does the life beyond extend to people who are not part of this group? If it's all about how it is that we can improve what we're doing now, that puts it all on us. And this is what Luther, again, objected to. Part of the Protestant Reformation thought process was it takes more than just works. It wasn't, not Luther objected to it. Actually, that's exactly what Luther believed. He didn't like the Epistle of James, which said that faith was also necessary. Luther said, no, just works. That's all we need. Just our good works are what's going to get us into heaven, or bring about the kingdom of God. And he threw out the Epistle of James, which says, no, faith is also necessary in concert with works. He called it the Epistle of Straw. In fact, he left it out of the Bible completely. The Lutheran Bible, to this day, some Lutheran Bibles don't have the Epistle of James. Because some people say, you got to have both. Other people saying, no, just one is okay. So what is it? How do we know? We don't know. So what are you doing here?
I thought you do.
I know. I'm asking you. I'm wondering. Every week. I'm wondering what I'm doing here every week. That's not too far off. I do one. And I question all the time. I mean, one of the things when I interviewed so many of you about what it is that you believe, and I got into the issues of faith, whoa! If I published some of those, people would think that we just had landed from outer space. Seriously, you take the whole group and look at it. In fact, when I did publish it, as you probably know, those of you who went with me to the seminary, remember the professor in the back saying, Father Hesse, I wasn't doctor yet. Father Hesse, we're worried that you're not a Christian church.
Well, are you not trying to create free thinkers?
I certainly am.
People who have critical judgment,
I certainly am.
ability to question.
Yeah, but the church is not trying to create that.
But that's a fabulous atmosphere for people who are inquiring.
Right. And I think we just cannot know. But some people will tell you that they definitely know. They don't want to be disturbed at all by thinking.
But you know, it comes down to leadership. Whether you look at Mandela or whether you look at the people who are in circumstances that have no hope for tomorrow, if the church goes over those people and gives them the leadership, and that's that cloak of we'll do it this way because the next life is better, that's an answer for them for this life.
It's true, but we kill those leaders. We kill the leaders who think that way. We do, as a society. Yes.
In this country?
Everywhere. Oscar Romero, Martin Luther King Jr., the Kennedys. Anybody who encourages people to think, they're dangerous. That's Desmond Tutu. How many death threats he's had in his life? Hundreds. Hundreds a week sometimes, he says, depending on what he says. And we don't want people. I think that the Jesus that we encounter in Scripture always encouraged people to think. He never, very rarely answered a question directly. He always answered it with another question. Who do people say that I am? Well, who do you think I am? He never answered exactly who he was. And even at the moment that he could have, the most critical moment, when he's about to die, before Pilate, he says, he refuses to answer. The whole story is set up so that we will be thinkers. And so what I would like to say, Vicki, and to all of you, is that I hope that we don't take what is set forth here as the limits of our thinking. That the whole idea of that faith, at least for me, is a thinking issue. It is not something that is set upon and finished. But some people want faith to be set upon and finished. And they want to know that that's what it is. Because when it does come down to the iffy moment, they don't want to have to think about it. Well, let's see, do I believe it or not? The plane's going down. Got about 2 minutes here. What do I do now?
I just come back from Minnesota and the bridge went down there. And one of the most fantastic stories that television could have ever picked up was how people who were injured and on that bridge in a state of mortal terror reached out immediately without thinking to help others. And there were some stories of heroism that will go down for years as a proof that people do care about others as much as self. It's fantastic.
That's quite something. I was thinking about, I was listening on the radio last night about there's a guy who's suing the city of New York right now for having saved the taxi driver whose taxi got blown up in the air by the steam that came up on Lexington Avenue and the big steam thing in last year. And luckily, he went and helped the taxi driver. Very few people were hurt when the whole thing ruptured, but he's suing the city of New York now for the trauma of having gone after to help that person, saying, I went and did this, but I want to let you know that this should not happen again. And this is, of course, what they're saying too in Minnesota about the bridge. And now they're looking and worried about all the bridges and so forth. And it raises a lot of questions. I think that if you've ever seen United 93, the film, with regard to what those people in that plane did, we weren't there, but we hear a lot of it. We heard a lot of it over the radio and so forth, and we know what happened in many cases. If you think about, talk about heroism, when people realized that was it. There was just no turning back. They were all going to go. And what they still managed to do to try to save people who were on the ground and so forth, that's just quite incredible also. But when it comes down to those moments, I'm really wondering what it is that people are thinking. One thing that Vicky's pointed out, many people in that moment think about others and not themselves. It becomes very, very selfless. So is that what faith is? A selfless act? Yeah. Perhaps. What else are people thinking? They're thinking, oh my God. So then they feel like the victim. So perhaps faith is related to, as I pointed out before, the way of feeling put upon, being the victim. Or faith can be something completely other. A belief in nothing. That nothing makes any difference. There are some people who would say to you, nothing makes any difference. The world is ordered as it is. It's going to happen. These things happen. And it just happens. And no amount, if you remember Lady Sings the Blues, do you remember that movie with Diana Ross years ago? She goes and she says, please, mister, please, I want to be like her. And the guy at the bar says, miss, no amount of slinky and makeup is going to make you look and sing like that. Of course, he was wrong. But the same sort of thing, I think, is active here. No amount of slinky or makeup, some people think, is going to make any difference in what happens in the world. We cannot. We have no control over it. We are all part of how it goes. Not a grand plan, but just that there are things that are much beyond our control, and we are just pawns in it. Other people say, no, we've got to, it's a dialogue. We have to work together with the universe. That's what I believe. Yeah. I'm a dialogue person. I'm working in concert with the universe. And that the universe is constantly trying to heal itself. And that whatever we do in order to try to bring about that healing, whether we call it peace or we call it something else, that's how the world is a better, quote-unquote, place. Yes. But everybody has their way of thinking. So I encourage you to think about what actually faith means to you, what the word means, if anything, and share it. I think the discussion is very, very, very enlightening. You're sitting on top of it here, so.
The word it's the wrong word. The word that you're taking is faith. You're borrowing it out of the Gospels. It's a Greek word, pistis. It really means trust. It means faith in the sense that I believe in you doesn't mean that I believe you exist. Yeah, we use the words that way. But if I said that I believe in you, what I really should say is I trust you. Right? I believe that you're a person of honor. That if you have said something to me, you will carry through on it. This is the word that keeps appearing. There's no other word that shows up again. It's not a word associated with doctrine or a belief system. And that apocalyptics, I mean, you're perfectly right. All four gospels have a strong vein, particularly John, of apocalyptic associated with it. But that was never part of Jesus' teaching in terms of what you see in the parables. He was very much a this life-oriented person. And I believe I think that she said is exactly on target. People are inherently good. The church has unfortunately latched on to the idea of original sin, which is a very non-Jewish concept by any means. The Jews never, ever took original sin as a big deal. He had to fall out of it. He did not do anything to human nature. The emerging church began to build on that and built on that substitutionary atonement that Jesus died for our sins. The Psalm is inveighed against that viciously in his 12 theses sitting on there. What we have with the word faith, if you substitute for a trust, we have to trust ultimately in ourselves. The value systems that we're going to bring to us as human beings that have done terrible, terrible things, they will always be with us. That's one of the things in the parable of the leaven. Jesus said there'll always be leaven. They're never going to have any pure joy. It will always be mixed. There will always be an alloy. There'll be joy, but there will be other evils that will be inevitable concomitants of that. And that's something that is part and parcel of our nature. But by and large, our nature is good. I deny totally and utterly the need for salvation because we are an evil people. I do not see that, and certainly in having studied the parables in an awful lot of detail from an awful lot of people, including some of the European studies, which most people don't take too much of a look at. The American studies are clear enough for people like Scott, Bernard Brandon Scott, and even Spong in his interpretations, which are very, very popular, if you will. They're meant for people to listen to. They're meant to be preached in the sense of an adversarial thing that says, look, do what you've been telling us to do. Think for yourselves. Look at what you're seeing, and then also look around you. Look at what Vicki says. People have shown themselves to be great and good towards one another when given the opportunity. Look at all that happened at 9/11. All the people that put themselves out that died because of what they did.
I don't disagree with anything you said, Ray, actually. The only thing I'd say that saying that this particular word means trust, and that's really what it's about, I think doesn't help the discussion any at all, in that we could still say that we must trust in something. Or that
something in ourselves.
Okay, trust in ourselves, that's something. We must trust in ourselves. I mean, I think that you're right. I think that that's what Jesus preached. It's not what the church has handed down to us. The church has said we must trust in the church. And we must trust in God, substituting God for church, as if there's no difference. And that is where a lot of the problem has come about. So my only point is that when somebody says you must have faith, I really want to know what that means to them. Right. Before they say to me that I should have it. Because I'm not sure that any of it is helpful without a thinking mind. Right. That any of it is helpful without an opportunity to discuss what that means. And I'm not sure that any of it is helpful if we just take it at face value. I think that you must have faith, or we must have faith, or even the discussion of faith, to say, what does it mean? It doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. It means very different things. And when we take it out of a Christian context, we talk to Jews about faith. We talk to Muslims about faith. One of the first things I remember when I was going through my the Ministries Commission to be ordained, Carol Anderson was the rector of All Angels in Manhattan at that time, now out in Beverly Hills, where Irene's daughter is a member. The first thing she said was, defend your faith. So I didn't know what that meant. So I paused a long time, and people started writing, and I figured, I better say something, you know? But what a question. Defend your faith. So I said, well, what do you mean? And people were, oh, he doesn't know what this means. So nobody answered me, even after that. So I said, oh, well, I guess you want to know what I believe. They said, no. I said, defend your faith. So I paused again. They're writing, this guy's never going to get through, you know, that's what I think they're writing, you know. And they were happy that I couldn't. They said, this person's ready for seminary. Ready to think, not ready just to spout off something that's been learned. And maybe it's not a thinking, defend your faith. The answer to that is not anything but a thinking person's answer. I think we need to think about that a long time before we ever say anything.
I think when we make a rote response, we are showing obedience. When we come to agreeing through thoughtful contemplation, we are in cooperation, and thereby allowing each and every mind to go to a little higher level.
So maybe we can say on the sign, defend your faith, question mark, let me get back to you on that one.
Makes sense.
Amen.